are live. It's nice to have you here, Colin.
Yes, it's good to be live. I don't think I've ever actually been live before.
Yeah, well, it appears we don't have any viewers, but that's kind of normal, you know. Oh, hey, Oros. so, so anyway, we were just talking about the kind of the first guy on that Twitter thread that kind of prompted the discussion. Actually, I should probably put that on my Telegram channel for other people to follow along. Um, what was the what was your own reaction to the first guy kind of being philosophical about this whole thing?
I mean, his response is, um,
You're Phileas, you're roboting.
sorry. I mean, but it,
Uh, tr Try again.
I'm a little better now.
Uh, Try again. Hey, uh, yeah, no, it's still roboting, man. Uh, can maybe you should hop in and out of the stream or try to reconnect. Let's see if that will work. Okay, well, I'll fill up some air while Phileas tries to reconnect and back onto it. So, what prompted this discussion is turn it off and Phileas will come back on. He still has the he has the he has the link. I'll see him, and he just device is not connected. They need to connect. Okay. Looks like he reset. Let me just ask him connect. Uh Anyway, so what prompted this stream while I wait for Phileas to get back on? What prompted this stream was a Twitter thread that made some rounds a couple days ago that was essentially compiling a bunch of people on TikTok reacting to this new app that allows you to de-age yourself and give yourself a and he is back. Adding him to stream. Okay.
Okay, hopefully better.
Okay, that's kind of better. It was a bit shaky, but now I think it works. So I was just talking a bit about the AI face changing technology that's causing a bunch of middle-aged people to have uh, prematurely ignited midlife crises.
Yeah. I'll say,
Yeah, you're you're roboting again, man.
I'm gonna try. Oh,
I don't know.
work? Do you think?
I don't know. Got chat. Is my voice clear? I'm guessing that since they haven't mentioned it, that my voice is clear. Try again.
I'm here. Can you hear me?
Apparently, I'm clear, but you're still kind of roboting, man. Let's see, Mike. He's he said that you should get a Starlink. Um. Okay. Reconnecting cables. He's suggesting. Like, are you on Wi-Fi or are you using Ethernet?
You know Wi-Fi.
Are you using your computer or phone?
computer.
Uh,
That's a laptop. I mean, it's not this stuff.
it might be something weird with your computer. If you would, could you try connecting on your phone?
Yeah, I'm trying that now.
Oh, there. Now it's clear.
Oh, is it clear now?
Out robot again. Anyway, while you try to get that connected onto your phone, I will continue on for the a bit introducing the topic more. It opens up, the Twitter thread opens up with this guy being very, very reflective about the fact that some real trad thought we were tech. The thread opens up with a guy being very, very philosophical and reflective about the fact that everyone's basically confronting themselves in the fact that they're seeing both the face that they kind of still imagine themselves to have, despite us living in an industrial society full of mirrors, and realizing by the very act of presentation that that's a lie at the same time. Because even though it's confirming the lie that you've always had, kind of, or maybe fable's more correct, a more morally neutral way to describe it. This legend about yourself that you hold in your mind about what your face really is. At the same time as it's being brought to life, it confronts you with the fact that, well, it's a fabrication. It's a legend. It's not actually real. And so you get a lot of very interesting different reactions from sad to very kind of pondering. Nope. Let's see. Oh, okay. So I'm going to kick. I'm going to kick the other Phileas and bring on the other one. Okay.
All right. It's time.
Test again.
Hello. Yes.
You're still kind of roboting.
Okay.
You're talking from your phone right now?
Now on the phone.
Yeah, I think this may just be an internet problem.
Okay. I mean, I'm not like in the. This is what we got.
Have you tried turning off on and off again? We're using two different in this case it's two different things. Actually resetting the Wi-Fi router might work.
Okay. Let me try. Yeah.
Okay.
All right. I'm gonna leave and I'll come back then.
Okay. See you in a moment. So while Colin tries to fix the Wi-Fi, see if that fixes the roboting. I'll continue some of my thoughts. So, in particular, there was a noticeable gender. Machines have risen. In particular, there's a notable kind of gender dynamic in that the men tend towards like in terms of reaction, have tended more towards a kind of a certain amount of regret and nostalgia. The opening guy kind of sets the tone for a lot of the men where they're very reflective about it, whereas with the women, comment saying when the actual convo started, yeah, maybe I may start up a new stream if we can get this working and do it all over again. But anyway, the whereas with the women, you definitely saw a lot more of a consuming impulse by them, where / deeper regret. Like it was either like was kind of typified by this one woman in particular, where she's just like, I'd go back and tell my younger self how beautiful you were and all that stuff, and ego feeding and whatnot. And other ones, you can immediately tell who the hoes were. That was a very interesting reaction when you see the women really kind of regret, and it looks like they've partied a lot, and have seen a lot of mileage. It's their reactions are very interesting. Let's see. Let's see if Phileas is going. Anyway, let's see. I don't actually see. I'll actually pull up the Twitter on here. Let's see. Copy link. This is nothing but less than consummate professional work here. Let's see. And do we? I gotta mute that. Mute for that, and okay. So, got a comment at the private chat. So yeah, so let's just pull up screen share. I would like to get Android on Oros. I'll have to talk with them to schedule that, because we especially need to do like the tech, have like a really good discussion about the split between the kind of Landian Protestant, for lack of a better word, post-liberal as a catch-all term, versus the Yarvinian kind of more Catholic reactionaries. So let's see. Okay, I'm gonna just try. Let's see. Let's share screen. Okay. Okay, gents. You can see my screen that I'm sharing right here. This is. Oh yeah, I'm using post-liberal in the very broadest sense of the word. Like, in terms of the conversation going on right now, post-liberal kind of means the Sohrab, Amari, Patrick Deneen type people. I'm just using it in the outside of the mainstream, just breaking with the liberal consensus as we define it right now, particularly from the right. Just everything that avoids all the more loaded labels and terminology of things like dissident right and whatnot. And it's just like, yeah, now you're trying to very seriously interact and build something outside of the current immediate one step forward consensus. Oh, and Phileas should be back. Okay, let's see. Remove. And okay.
Okay, is this any better?
Oh yes, much better. Awesome.
Okay, good. The good old. Luckily my wife had some spare Ethernet cable that I didn't know we had.
Awesome. Awesome. Okay, so in that case, 15 minutes in, I'll I'll make sure to put a note of that. So anyway, I'll stop sharing that right now. So
And all real Catholics are not post-liberal, Zoros. That's.
So yeah, the now that we can officially begin to begin the conversation, like what are your just like out of the box technology? Because what is it? You're kind of a bit of an older man, if I recall correctly, and
I'm 29.
ah, the cable
Don't say
elves,
that to me yet.
cable the cable elves, they have struck again. Why?
I'm an early Zoomer. You don't
Okay,
understand.
okay, now you're back.
Yeah.
Okay. Uh, anyway, so yeah, you're wait, Oro said you're like 38.
No, I am 29. Stop
Okay.
lying.
So yeah, we're both roughly the same age then. Getting up there, almost at the dreaded middle-aged, the time of the middle age. Like out of the box, what's like your thoughts on what's like your reaction to the idea of like of being able to automatically like, uh, you know, give yourself a teenage face and post it on social media, um, as like a live reaction.
Well, I guess it's it's not substantially different than the other face app type technology that's kind of out there. A couple of years ago, someone took a picture of me with a Snapchat filter that turned me into a woman or something. Um, all these exist to kind of like
And and you're roboting again. Uh, what? That's, something must be this is a cursed this appears to be a cursed stream. Okay, try again. Uh yeah, you're still roboting. You know what? Um it could just be like I don't know, like whatever's happening with StreamYards. It could be that as well. I don't know. The death of Western infrastructure. Oh, I can't get my niche nano stream up and running. The West has fallen. Billions must die.
I think you being on the internet is ruining my bandwidth. I'm sorry. How is it now?
Loud and clear. Loud and clear.
Okay, I figured out the problem, and hopefully it's fixed.
Okay. Okay. Anyway, we were talking about you were talking about how it's not substantially different from previous stuff, which I know there was like, you had like Instagram dog ears, things like that, as well as
Yeah, well, I mean that's I guess it is substantially different from that in that nobody, well, I guess nobody you would think or wants themselves to have dog ears. I mean, or at least the
yeah.
very
I I think for me the big difference is whereas like Instagram, a lot of the Instagram stuff was like curated to the static image, whereas this is doing enough legwork that's doing it on the fly for video.
yeah.
So in that respect, it's an all greater amplification of what already came before to manipulate your own self-image. In this case, however, it's very whereas like was it like we have 5,000-year-old examples of makeup and things like that. Whereas like young women in particular, kind of like always had an incentive to maximize their looks because that's their primary way they advertise value to society. Um, Now it's like middle-aged people without any effort can just click on and and then boom, they see themselves as they in their mind's eye as they see in their mind's eye.
Yeah, I forget who said it. I'm gonna try to look this quote up, but at some point somebody said like the our generation will have nightmares about growing old, essentially. And this is kind of where we're at right now. Like um, that this type of technology kind of is staving off the nightmares of what is really like the realities of life.
Yeah, yeah, it's like it's one of those interesting contrasts that you see with how technology is fundamentally, and this also interrelates to some other interesting conversations as well that I'd like to have, especially because I just finished listening to that Eric Weinstein episode on the Joe Rogan Experience, because he talks about how like you know radically new technology kind of just stopped happening in the 70s for various reasons, and his bugbear is partially about basic physics. But to connect that to this, what you saw was, and I believe it was Skull King on Twitter that actually mentioned this specifically, that millennials are kind of like the first generation for whom technology as a consumer experience really isn't changing that much, other than maybe the smartphone. Um, because if you grew up in like if you were like born in the 70s, you saw such radical changes in terms of technology. You know,
Yeah,
calculators went from like these giant expensive things that you and specialized piece of equipment that you got in college and things like that to or in some cases you actually were introduced to a slide rule. My
yeah.
dad was like one one year removed from having to learn the slide rules in the classroom.
No,
Uh,
yeah. My dad still has a slide rule. Like,
honestly, they're really honestly they are really they are really cool. I like maxing old technology to see what you really can do with it when
yeah,
pushed to its limits. But anyway, back to this. In particular, something that's really kind of interesting is an example of like how technology fundamentally will shape how you are and how you perceive the world. Is like what is it like for the baby boomers? Like most of them, or a significant fraction of them, dream in black and white because that's what they watched as kids. They watched
okay. I
black and
didn't
white
even know
TV.
that. I didn't know that.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. And it kind of makes sense. Like that just kind of generally happens to people whenever you focus on something a lot. Like for example, have you ever heard of the Tetris effect?
The Petrus effect?
The Tetris effect.
Tetris effect. No, I have not heard of this.
It's for people that like to obsessively play Tetris because it's a very good meditative kind of grinder game.
Yeah, it's like relaxing.
Yeah, they'll you'll start seeing the world around the idea of tetrominoes. That is, you'll look at parts of the world and see how they fit together according to the particular perspective of the game of Tetris.
Yeah, okay. I mean, that makes sense. I think, and I feel like that's something that even I would do. I used to work for certain large shipping company, and at some point it's like, okay, I'm always, it's like every day I'm thinking about, well, how am I fitting more things into here? And so like when you get into that headspace, you're like there.
Yeah, yeah. Part of it is that, but also in the case of, and this is where to slightly rein this back more into the discussion about I don't know what you even call this app quite, or the application specifically within TikTok for this because I don't want Chinese spyware on my phone. Uh,
I mean, I guess
the
it's a filter at the end of the day.
Yeah, it's a filter. It's the youth filter. Um, I think what's going to be more interesting about it is how people it will begin the development in a way that previously wasn't really there before, because one of the things about the internet is, and technology in general, um, both technology in general and the internet in particular, there there is the consumer cycle of adoption, so early adopters and whatnot. And in particular, where this becomes interesting is the idea of the hyperreal personality. I've exposited on this a bit earlier in some of my other streams, that that essentially, as we're participating right now, as you as Phileas, me as David Wayne slash Karaticus Jack, we take aspects of our personality and intensify them and bring them, max them out, and then put a label on them. We put attach an image onto them,
Yeah.
and that becomes an extension of ourselves. And when the internet originally started, especially like at the text-based internet, it only could affect really a small portion of the population that really was dedicated to the medium. And then you kind of started seeing it happen with things like Facebook. Um,
Yeah,
we
and it's you talking about this is and especially about applications is there's been kind of an inverse thing going on, right? The internet is invented as a way for the Department of Defense to communicate across state lines instantly,
mhm.
essentially, and has had this big consumer boom when it got into like the market.
Yeah,
But like things are kind of inverse now. So now you have this technology that's developed for the market that will have military or espionage, all these other ancillary applications, face app or face altering filters or AI that recognizes faces. The more refined this gets, it's just going to be facial recognition for security. But it's like the opposite direction of where it was used to be headed. It used to be the military or security application was first, and then the consumer application came out later. But now it's like opposite.
yeah, it's all being pushed. It very much is a case where, especially now, especially this, starts to tie into things like fifth generation warfare and whatnot. And where I see the real danger or potential in this case of the youth filter, I guess we'll call it
Yeah,
the filter for the purposes of discussion, um, is that it will kind of complete an aspect of and hit the human mind in a very distinct way. Whereas like you saw the problem of like Instagram face, or in some cases where women would be like, uh, you know, wake up, and be horrified that their boyfriends would see them without makeup. Um, in this case, it's a seamless, frictionless way, and that's one of the things I've realized about the internet once you start looking it up, like or really reading about it. Everything's about just removing friction. Um, like that's literally how Andy Weir, for The Martian, got famous, or got a lot of traction. Was his fans were like, we're too lazy to download the EPUB slash
yeah,
PDF or whatever. Just put it on Amazon, and so he did, and then eventually got picked up and all that stuff. And so in this case, it allows a very, very intimate, bypassing the need to have higher reasoning to like virtualize your identity and sense of self and come up with these rationalizations. And it will allow you to be in that moment once again, living as yourself and presenting as yourself as you already kind of internalize, just kind of naturally, but it's made manifest back into the virtual world effortlessly. And that that's quite frankly scary. And I'm a guy that's kind of like bullish on hyper reality. I have
yeah,
this idea of the beyond real, that we got to collapse the hyper real and all reality into a coherent, balanced experience. But this genuinely is like, no, this is actually unsettling. This is the live in the pod mentality in your
yes.
pocket.
No, yeah, I mean, and it is it's very much, I mean, to return to childhood, or I was like, why can't I be a kid forever? It's, pod life or whatever you want to call it, bugman life. It's essentially infantilized, right? Like, you get your slop for free, and you look at TikTok, and everything's kind of spoon fed to you, and in return, on your public persona, everybody gets to see you when you look to your best or whatever. And so, like, your most vain passions are fulfilled, and you never live higher than how you were as a teenager, and your public face is still you as a teenager.
Yeah, yeah, that it's kind of interesting in terms of how this really. I wonder how this will collide with the problem of nostalgia because what was it? I forget who did a good Twitter thread on this about how one of the reasons uh, why we have this continual obsession with the 80s and 90s is because um, the last generation where you could have nostalgia for various reasons. Some of it was just changing technology. Um, and I'm annoyed by Eli, the computer guy, but he's a genuine dude as far as I can tell. He points out that one of the problems that we run into now is that media never dies. We live in the age of information immortality, and so and so that I guess you could say this is almost like a precursor to the notion of a sort of digital immortality. Have you seen that 4chan post that's spreading around uh, talking about uh, talking about how Facebook is working on the Lazarus project?
No, and I'm not overly familiar with the Lazarus Project.
Okay, so basically, it's claimed by an anon that uh, in Facebook they're working on an AI to take your data and essentially create a digitalized, personalized AI to mimic you and continue on.
Oh, okay, yes.
Yeah,
So
yeah,
okay, yeah, I can make the next steps. So essentially, so I mean, this is so strange. Um, I know people in my personal life who have had loved ones pass away, and they continue to maintain that deceased loved one's Facebook page,
Oh,
which to me is a little strange, but okay, you're grieving. This was how this old person talked to her friends. Um,
that's still kind of ghoulish, though.
it's a little. I mean, this person I know has a, coping skills. Maybe not her best strong suit. Um, but yeah, I mean, I can see how, like, to a person who can't let go, or who can't, like, um internalize, like, the realities, like, because death is a reality that comes for everybody. No one's dodging that one
Yeah,
yet.
like I could even see for like I don't know, like a brief mourning period. You take like final pictures of haunts and things like that with like memorials, whatnot, of your loved one, and then like probably end it at the funeral proper, and then be like, yeah, this now stands as like a memorial. I can kind of understand that. Um, though I'm not I though I do have like a persona that's very online. Uh, in terms of my actual, identity, I just am not active on like Facebook or anything like that at all. So
No, me
it's kind
either.
of it's kind of strange to think about that. And
I mean, there's crazy stuff that goes on Facebook. Those boomers are posting for sure.
though, I
I
mean,
mean, it's all I guess I always, whenever I think of like the boomer posting on Facebook, I think of that the Donald character from the Murdoch show episodes, which yeah,
Yeah, yeah. The I guess one thing that's really kind of itching at my mind is like it's kind of like an interesting sort of fate to actually be immortalized because
yeah,
previously
yeah. I
like
mean, and
if
that's
we
what I was kind of going with. It's like this person like is keeping alive this person, which the healthier and thing to do would be to like confront reality. This person's passed away. That's terrible and sad for you. You have to like deal. But again, this is like pod life or whatever, and he's like, well, actually, you don't have to like deal. You can have this person live forever with their Facebook page.
yeah I guess one of the interesting things that I'd like to kind of contrast is is if you look at like who has been immortalized in history, essentially, well, one of the key differences is it actually took an enormous amount of effort to immortalize someone. And the person that would be immortalized almost always had to do something extraordinary. Um, and so consequently, the nature of the immortalization was was very much this, and also, a lot of it is quite frankly just passive, where it's not like you just write something down and make like a statue or something like that, or even like Roman graffiti in like the most inane
Yeah.
of circumstances. Biggest
Yes,
stickers we'll see here.
there are Roman
Uh,
prostitutes who are immortalized.
uh, but generally speaking, like a Caesar, or even like the greatest paradoxical, famous person of them all, Shakespeare, of whom we know nothing and everything. Um, you know, uh, it- you're dealing with uh like a reserved status of a person that truly lived life to the fullest. Whereas, and I guess this is one of the things where a lot of people are really regretting it because you know uh, essentially they're not. It's not like they're trying to live life in this extraordinary way to kind of like sacrifice conventional life to achieve something great. They're not Alexander the Great who weeps when he finds out there's no more world to conquer. Um, they essentially had an ordinary life before them, and they just kind of wasted it. I think that's
Yeah, I
probably.
mean, yeah,
Mm,
yeah. It's like, but they were satisfied with the somas of our time. Like, they were smoking weed and playing video games and copulating and whatnot, and so they didn't think about it.
yeah,
Like, you have to like break that about people. Like,
I get.
it's like, hey, you feel fine or you feel happy with your life because like you actually have all these chemical and social distractions.
Yeah, it's one of those. I guess that's what this filter really forces upon you. It could either it is kind of like a red pill, blue pill moment in a certain respect, where if you're in this case you're force fed both, and you're given a choice of which portal to go into, um, between essentially trying to embrace fantasy or kind of like really begin to seriously reflect on what you can do going forward. In that respect, I guess that's a good thing in a very important sense because it's forcing the issue upon you. At the same time, man, I think it's gonna be really ugly to see what happens when people find out that you can't virtualize yourself out of death.
Yeah, I mean, but that's I mean, I guess there is like the weirdo, transhumanist type thing is like, well, we'll develop this and we'll upload ourselves and we'll no longer we'll transcend bodies or something.
I mean,
And
that, that, that-
I mean, that's the logical, like, the problem is for these people is not their appearance. It's at its root, the problem is that they're embodied. And so they'll have to, if this kind of if the path we're on is going to be catering to this type of impulses, to these type of impulses, then we'll have to like have such an instrumentalized kind of view of our own bodies, and our bodies will become obsolete for these people in their point of view.
Yeah, it's very much a case of what is it? It's very like Elon, famously kind of holds to this idea that this notion that we can in fact upload ourselves and has this intrinsically kind of reductionist view of humanity. Though paradoxically, he kind of does the opposite of what he believes. He thinks we're
Yeah.
likely in a virtualization,
Yes.
and
Yeah, Elon Musk, wants everybody to have Neuralink, and he thinks the best thing he can do for his life is have more is father more children. Like,
and then on top of that, he's like honestly the one Silicon Valley mogul who is actually making things. Uh, and everyone else is basically selling software as a service, except for kind
yeah,
of
I mean,
Apple.
Elon Musk is a controversial figure on all sides, I think. But the fact that he did something in America that hasn't been done since Henry Ford is remarkable. Like,
Yeah, it really is, and to a certain degree, you can kind of still see the latent influences of him being ultimately a man of silicon, in that Teslas don't have the best human build quality, where it's like, oh, there's missing pieces, things like that. Um,
yeah, Tesla has the bells and whistles on Teslas are really nice, but um, maybe work a little bit more on like the paneling or something.
yeah, it'll be interesting to see what happens there, uh, but I guess one of the interesting things that I think will that will start to present itself to the post Elon generation, I guess you could say, if I may be so bold to suggest something like this,
Yeah,
is that you're going to see a increasing divide, and I would say you're already seeing that to a certain degree manifest itself, um, in parallel-ish fashion with the whole culture war that's happening. Like if you look at marriage rates, for example, um, like red America versus blue America is like they're like two different ethnicities. Like I
yeah,
think there's a 4% intermarriage rate between red and blue America now. Uh,
yeah. No, that would make sense. It,
um,
it makes sense on the basis of just that you can't really have that kind of relationship with someone who doesn't share core values with you.
yeah, and I think that core value ultimately is going to be, you know, ultimately comes down to anthropology, in the most basic sense. What is your anthropology and how does it manifest? Because as much as it is an abused term, it is an apt term. The left, blue America, fun, fundamentally is pushing right now. At least their hardliners are pushing for a Gnostic conception of what it is to be human. Um, that is just it's just your self-proclaimed identity and whatnot. No matter not gonna endlessly rehash about how they're inconsistent about it, but that's ultimately what it is. But the problem with the right now is that we haven't really figured out where are we trying to strike the balance between the fact that humans are have souls and they have bodies and they're both supposed to go together. Um, what was it C.S. Lewis did in the Screw Tape Letters, and I think
Yeah,
honestly think the Screw Tape Letters are kind of underrated in that respect, where he has this uh, where Wormwood is talking about how humans have this property of undulation because they're unnatural combinations of flesh and spirit. Um,
yes, and like when reading the Screw Tape Letters, you have to realize that Screw Tape is a demon, and like everything he says, everything he asserts as truth is also a lie. So like,
so I think it's gonna be an interesting conversation, and as Oros mentioned earlier, I'd like to organize an actual proper stream just narrowing on this question because how we deal with technology, like for example, like to pull something off the fly for like a biblical example of this, like how would you approach, like how many pastors have seriously thought about the implications of what Paul says about you know, women adorn yourself modestly to like Instagram filters.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, it's kind of crazy, and really, I guess on the ground, people who have to like deal with every day, young men who are looking, for suitable. Yes, it's strange to think that I'm one of the pro tech people. Sorry, I'm reading Oris's chat.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah, I saw it too. I chuckled as
yeah.
well.
But so where was I going with that? Yeah, so like on the ground, like women in church are generally not. If you're the kind of man that these women like, and if you're looking for these, they're not going to be on Instagram. Um, the the woman you want to marry is not going to like be doing a lot of that. And that makes it really hard, on the ground to, if you're not a church going gentleman. But like, I don't know what to tell. I don't have advice on that front for men, really.
Just a moment. A friend of mine is able to also join us as well. Uh, just sent them the link. Okay, so back to the whole thing. Uh,
Yeah, the
your
filter.
point. Yeah,
Yeah.
back to your point about the filter and whatnot. Uh, I guess
Yeah.
one. Hmm?
Yeah, I mean, I guess the filter is I mean, the filter is just, it's the same thing as you know trans people who would think I identify as this other gender. I'm going to use this filter on
Ooh,
on my picture, and I know people who have done this. I you know in my experience, I have known people who now identify as genders that they were not born. Yeah, I don't even know how you would want to say this. Like the language is so convoluted, but you know what I'm talking about. Who have decided that their Facebook profile pic is now this filtered picture of themselves as a woman.
yeah. It's
And it's essentially the same thing. It's like, well, I desire to look young. This is how I publicly present myself. And so like, and the representation becomes the reality.
yeah. Um, just to introduce my good friend Grant Brooks will now join us. Um, hey, how's it going?
Good evening, gentlemen.
Good
Good evening.
evening.
We're just kind of having after a bit of a rocky start for the first 15 minutes. We've been talking about the implications and some secondary things that flow from this face filter app on TikTok that allows middle-aged people to see themselves as teenagers.
Yeah, this is the one that's going around of like the people where they're freaking out because it's like what their kids would look like or whatever. I
There's
think
that.
that's the thing that I saw
Yeah,
on Twitter.
that actually is a good reminder. There was one where it's like she's comparing herself to her daughter, which was honestly like probably the most wholesome uh application of it, where you can see that your child is a reflection of you in a very real sense, yet still different.
It's an interesting thing too because the OP who was tweeting about it, it's how it came up on my timeline, was talking about how many of these people wouldn't have children, or if they did, like there would be all these other complications, and as a sort of like, I don't know. In a certain sense, I think one of the things that I thought immediately upon looking at it is like it's almost an even crueler thing than to have never seen this. If you are one of those
Hmm.
people, like there's going to be examples of birth control. Being able to see something that you can't have is almost worse. Am I cutting out?
Oh, you were. Now you're back.
Okay.
Yeah. We were mentioning that a bit earlier about how it essentially forces upon you a reflection upon what your life actually was. And generally speaking, I mentioned this a bit earlier, but I don't think Phileas heard it. But one of the things I noticed, there was a bit of a gender difference in response, in that the men were usually much more reflective, and kind of were they seemed, even if this makes sense, they sounded as they looked, or they looked as if they were quietly contemplating, like they weren't actually thinking, even though they weren't talking. It's more they were just like, oh man, I am middle aged, and my life has flashed before my eyes once again. Or it was like the first guy in the thread, where he's just is very kind of like, yeah, people have been reflecting upon this. Oh, appears we've chased away all our audience, gentlemen. Well, this is for posterity. Anyway, anyway, so you saw in the case of like the first gentleman, where he's being very kind of reflexive, or reflective about it. And in other ones, you can see that reflections going on in their eyes and their reaction. Whereas with the women, it was generally either like, one in particular just doubled down on like, oh, I would go back and tell my younger self that I was beautiful and whatnot. Shocker, she was actually fat. And she probably was fat when she was younger. And then other ones, it's like you just see an immense amount of regret, and those are the ones I'd actually like to pick their brain about, because uh, it's very likely they were just party hoes essentially, and now they're, as you said before, like they're waking up from a dream that was created for them, where they saw that they had a kid that they nursed and bonded with for several days in their mind, and then it was ripped from them.
Yeah, I mean, I guess it does make sense that kind of men would look back and be like, "Oh, these are, I this brings me back to like these choices that I made, because it used to be perhaps when women had to always or very soon prepare for marriage, kind of mature faster. And this has been uh womanhood biologically occurs, you know, at an instant, essentially, or you just it happens to women. Um, whereas men have to like be in this process of initiation, and have to really kind of make all these conscious choices in their progression into manhood. And so like for these women, but now all like any consequence of being a woman is now abolished because of technology, birth control and abortion especially. And so now, womanhood can essentially be avoided, and women can exist in a perpetual state of girlhood. And so like this filter like brings them back to that appearance. And now, there's a joyous, it's like, oh, what my experience is matching my looks. Whereas men have to bear still the consequences of their choices. And so when they look upon this like visage of themselves before these consequences like came to them, they become more pensive about their choices. And that's me just shooting from the hip.
Yeah, yeah. That Hmm. That's that is an interesting line of analysis. In particular because as Paglia said, women are versus men are becoming. That that would partially explain like why the men are much more reflective about when they're when they see their younger selves versus women who have essentially an alien yet familiar essence kind of thrust upon them. It that would make sense of why they would react that way. I It would be interesting to see what type of vanity industry kind of springs from this, because each generation as you progress in age, they all get their vanity industries that essentially cater to their particular issues and idiosyncratic tendencies and whatnot. Like like for example, the American kind of like the oh hey Jacob the for example, the American kind of like yachting industry, for example, is kind of blew up because of there was so much wealth from the boomer generation, and now you see this entire generational cycle of yachts starting to be hand down and flooded into the market because people are now getting to the point where they're so old that they can't even handle their kind of like plug and play yachts. I
Yeah.
wonder I wonder what will be the knock-on effects of something like this, where you have a generation that's essentially trapped in a cultural, nostalgia bubble that is being aided by the ability to literally be constantly reminded, like as you're as you're eating your definitional avocado toast as part of being a millennial, that you can see what you would have looked like when you were you know 16 and watching Friends, but you're also in 2020 and eating or 2023 and eating avocado toast with your aging millennial counterparts.
Yeah, and it's weird. Like even Friends is not like when we were like Friends was happening when we were in elementary school, but now among even older millennials who would not get the humor of Friends when it was airing. It's like, oh, we're all Friends is our thing. It's a millennial thing. It's like,
Well, I mean, in fairness, we're kind of like on the border generation. Like we're in that liminal zone of where it's like for example, for me, I define myself as Gen Z simply because, well, there's two reasons. One is, it's better to be the vanguard of a new generation than the last of another generation because you're in the shadow versus making the shadow. Um, but also, like I think the best kind of spiritual definition of differentiating the millennial versus the Gen Zer is, do you remember like 9/11 or its immediate after effects?
yeah. And I was actually about to, because when you mentioned Friends, the first thing I remember, the first thing I think about when I think about Friends is 9/11. um because
Interesting.
because Friends famously, for a TV sitcom that was airing in 2001, set in New York City, did not have any acknowledgement of 9/11 happening. They cut a shot of the New York City skyline from their theme song. In one episode, Joey wore a Fire Department of New York T-shirt, and that can be said as the most acknowledgement of 9/11's occurrence in the universe of Friends.
That's interesting. That's actually really interesting. I did remember the DC snipers because I lived there. And I remember my play dates getting canceled at the time. And that's about as much as I remember of
Yeah, I
kind of
mean, I
like
was 7 of 9 when 9/11 happened.
yeah, yeah. So anyway, the I also have like a very terrible autobiographical memory, but that's besides the point. Um Grant, what are your
You know
thoughts on
what's
this?
funny about that whole thing is like I barely remember 9/11, but I remember crystal clear the speech that George Bush gave to Congress like days later, where he did
Oh,
the sort of like fire and brimstone bit. Do either of you remember that one?
No, I don't remember anything. I remember like literally nothing.
Well, okay, it's I don't know. I'd have to go back and watch it to like get a better idea of what exactly it was. I just remember like, and I was really really young at the time. Like this is maybe my earliest memory, but just like the tone of it, like you felt this sort of American power. And I would have like I was literally like less than 5 years old. I would have no way of expressing what that meant, but I don't know. It was a very, very strange memory of like someone did something to us and we're definitely going to do something back to them. And it's a weird thing too, because I've had some experience with New Yorkers. And the thing that I've found, or I would say maybe like coastal elites, if you want to call it that, and the thing that I found in some ways is that 9/11 doesn't imprint on their consciousness nearly as strongly as it does for middle America, who really, in a certain sense, wasn't the target of 9/11. And it's a strange thing that I have not heard anyone remark upon that, but it's something that I've been thinking about a little bit.
Huh.
Yeah. Like the target, and so like when you think about like 9/11, there is all of this kind of, like the Bush speeches, and so it's like this is attack on America, when you could basically make the choice that even by then, even by like the late 90s, like America was essentially split into these coastal elites and then the heartland, or red state America. And I really don't think, like the Taliban gets a lot of sympathy on Twitter among certain anonymous people, because the Taliban's target really isn't red state America. It's these people who are pushing regime change in places, and cultural revolutions. But back then, like that wasn't apparent.
Yeah, I think you still had like the residual cultural unity between I don't know, maybe between those places. I don't know. Like it's a weird puzzle in my head of why this goes the way that it does. Because you would really think, looking at it just on paper, that it would be the coastal elites and such that would take it way more personally, because it is sort of like and like, why does the Taliban take issue with you? Well, the regime change and the liberalism and all that. But it really does, I don't know. I think maybe the observation you take from it is like there's a certain sense in which it almost doesn't matter who the real target is. You just had this sort of like instinctive patriotism that kicked in, or it didn't, depending on the type of person that you were.
One kind of like interesting reflection that I had with the Taliban in particular was remember like when 2 months ago, that I think maybe it was 1 month ago, when there was people leaking like emails and things like that from the Taliban government, now that they
Yeah.
finally won, where they're like, man, I have to like commute and I'm away from my wife and kids, and now we have to like, we
Yeah,
had
all
to-
these Taliban freedom fighters are instantly becoming Kaczynski pilled. Like,
I found that kind of interesting in a certain respect, because at least me and Grant, and I would also guess you as well, Colin, we're kind of like, we're kind of like dissidents of the kind of coastal elites that we're talking about. In a very real respect, there's an interesting sort of, we're seeing essentially what are the fruits of success in terms of, in this post 9/11 world, where for various reasons, especially once 2008 came around and wokeness started to take hold, there are theories about like
Yeah.
how banks pushed it and whatnot. Like a friend of mine was literally in Denver when the whole Occupy Wall Street thing was a thing, and it was all super unified, right and left. And then all of a sudden they kept pushing the libertarian white males because
Yeah.
wokeness, and all that stuff. And I guess it's one of those interesting parallels between us and essentially people that are trying to just assert their own sovereignty on how even as you try to do the ultimate act of asserting sovereignty, you can't completely exit from essentially the technological hyperreal system. You have to negotiate with it on your on what terms you're going to exactly cede in order to win, because it's not like Afghanistan could just be completely go back to the medieval ages and just completely disconnect and unplug from everything. They have to negotiate. They're negotiating right now with the UN and whatnot.
Yeah.
Sorry if that was a bit rambly.
No, yeah, I mean,
No, that's fine.
Yeah, I mean, and it's telling that, like, we are essentially, I mean, if the three of us represent some strand of dissident, or maybe three strands of, like, just people who live in proximity to the coastal elites or the GAE or whatever you want to call this force that is kind of globalizing the world, but like we have to contend with it, and we're like directly under the thumb, right? And the Taliban might be the most dissident you could possibly get, and they still have to like contend with it. Like they still have to. It's like, okay, Taliban, you won, and now you get to sit and have laptop jobs too. Like,
right now, like telling these guys that have been, calling in airstrikes on their neighbors that they've been feuding with for 800 years. It's like, okay, now it's your turn to like get a State Department job. Now you need to
yeah.
you need to enter the 4-hour life.
Here's how you use Excel. Like, okay.
I mean, in a very real sense, it's the ultimate blue state flex, where they just come in and say, "Hey, yeah, so that TPS report for the UN, if you could get that in by Saturday."
Could you finish that, please? That'd be great. Yeah. I don't know. And the thing that I will say as well, like as sort of a corollary here, if we look at guys like Jack Dorsey or Elon Musk, I think it's not unfair to say that they sort of come from this milieu that Occupy Wall Street created. And yeah, they negotiated, but you want to talk about those guys, like they have this ability to make an impact because they're really, in a certain sense, they're on the very frontier of the system. I mean, that's stretching it a little bit, but I think there's something there.
Yeah, that Dorsey's an interesting case, because if you look at him and really kind of investigate him, as far as I can tell, he is both like this hyper Machiavellian dude in a certain respect, because he did actually, like, objectively speaking, kind of steal the company from was it Evan Williams, if I recall correctly, was the real kind of like founder of Twitter, if you had to put a singular person behind it. At the same time, he does appear to also legitimately kind of have the very stereotypical, utopian tech bro vision of old Silicon Valley. And then he just kind of got broken by Twitter's own internal bureaucracy. Whereas at least with Elon, he legitimately has shown kind of like great man potential, like in talks with other people and whatnot, and like Orus's Discord. We talked about how it's like how he kind of showed where this post like private public company synthesis happens, where he takes over a corporation, in this case Twitter, and he brings in Tesla engineers because he knows they're loyal, to like examine all the lockdown code bases, databases, and in order to see what's happening inside of under the hood in Twitter. That's legitimately like great man, kind of like transcending the cultural forces and milieus that naturally will just shove us along, simply because we don't have that amount of power.
Well, and for what it's worth too, and I don't want to sound like I'm really singing Elon Musk's praises because I'm not the biggest fan of his, but the truth of the matter is too, there's probably not that many people who could have done that. Like there's not that many people who are at least somewhat sympathetic to a dissident point of view and have the like both the resources and the capability to pull a move like that off.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean the Elon Twitter thing, I mean I guess to me the best litmus test is what are the bad people saying. And so like now you've got everybody from you know lefty Twitter to now even Sorav Amari. Like it's like, oh, Elon Twitter is terrible. I hate this. Like,
Yeah,
okay.
exactly.
It's like, okay, so all these people who run the spectrum of like sometimes friendly to us and then utterly despise us, and they all hate it.
Like snakes in the grass.
Yeah. And
yeah,
they
there's
all
definitely something to be said for that. Like even the whole idea of Trump coming back on Twitter. Like I know it's arguable, like he probably won't actually return, but like the unbanning of his account. That's
I
a
really don't know. I
massive
mean,
win.
I really don't know.
Oh
because
yeah.
To me, it feels like as soon as 2020, like January 1st, 2024, and like the campaign is really on, like he's got to come back.
Oh yeah. Like I legitimately await Trump's return. I don't know about you, gents, but I got an under 5,000 follow on Trump's account, which was pretty awesome. Uh, it's kind of weird when you're used to seeing an account that normally has like tens of millions of follows, and then you're just like, oh, 5,000.
Yeah.
But yeah,
Yeah, I mean, I think that is so significant. More than maybe we appreciate as like a victory for the First Amendment, because it's not only like it is in this sense like a sort of win for Occupy Wall Street and a win for, for lack of a better description, the Sargonites, the classical liberals. Like we brought the First Amendment back to the public square in terms of Twitter being this public space.
Yeah, and I even think, I mean, when you look at like what the Twitter files released and what everybody was saying, it was hard even for like Democrat representatives and stuff like to like kind of defend Twitter banning Trump. Like it's like, well, I mean, legally he was the president at the time that he was banned from one of the largest social media platforms. Like,
I mean, arguably speaking, it could be considered illegal according to certain court precedents. For example,
yeah, exactly. And so like the progressive line was always kind of this like safetyism stuff. It's like, oh well, it was harmful. It was
dangerous.
It was dangerous.
There was going to be an insurrection. They were going to break our holy democracy.
My favorite exchange was Jack Dorsey. It was in the wake of the 2024 or the 2020 election, and like all the legal battles were happening, and Jack Dorsey was sitting in front of some senatorial a committee, and Tammy Duckworth is like pulling up Trump tweets, and it's like, he's lying, you can't do anything. And like Jack Dorsey is just have to look at her and says, you're allowed to lie on the internet. Like like even if you don't think he was lying or do, it's like, if you think this is a lie, okay, whatever, but you're allowed to do that on the internet.
yeah, it was one of those. It was so surreal when January 6th happened, quite frankly. Like I remember
Dude, that was the best day on Twitter and arguably one of the best days of my life.
I actually
was such a blast.
I was visiting back home from college at the time, and I thought about going that day, but I was lazy, so I just woke up at like 1 p.m. I saw on like Fox News, the whole thing that was going on. I was like, it's happening. and then
Dude, literally.
then I found out no, it was just
Okay,
an unguided boomer tour.
going
I
back to
remember
the whole
two
like,
things. Yeah,
but there
I
was some
remember-
excitement with that. Go ahead,
yeah,
sorry.
I remember sitting down in the break room and seeing the picture of the guy walking through like the atrium with the podium on his shoulder, and just thinking, "Oh, that's crazy."
It was
and
so
then-
based.
And then I remember Cantbot's just breakdown. It's like, why aren't they just legislating things right now? Why aren't they banging the gavel?
Yeah. Okay, did either of you gentlemen follow Minesweeper on Twitter?
No.
No.
Oh, you majorly missed out. So Minesweeper is one of these. He's a dissident guy. I think his account has been gone for a long time, but he was like a Q watcher in the weeks after Trump's defeat in 2020. Well, right. Okay. That's a whole nother issue. Anyway,
Yeah.
not going to touch that. But anyway, after the
Practically, it was a
2020
defeat.
election, right. After the 2020 election, he was in all, like, he was one of us, but he was in all these Q chats, and he was like giving daily updates on like what they were saying. And I mean, you know, you kind of thinking to yourself, like, okay, these are just like weird, insane cultists. But in the weeks like leading up, there would be like interesting little tidbits. And then the day of, like, the amount of stuff that just came out was like insane. You had this split within Q of like the people who were like, no, this can't be right, versus the people who were doing the like, we are the storm. It's time to storm the
Yeah.
Capitol. Like, this
Where
is how
we
you do it.
go one, we
Yeah.
go all.
And it was like, and then you had those Panther Den edits that were coming out of like, Trump is going to suspend the Constitution and all this stuff, with all the like the jump cuts and the Vince McMahon and like the MK Ultra lights and everything, the Hyperborea with the spinning sun. It's just like, it was a wild time to be on Twitter. And it was just so fun too, because it had been so like, it was just bleak. Because like Trump was basically getting punked over the whole, like, regardless of what you think of whether 2020 was legitimate or not. I think there's a question there, but like, it was just weak sauce, man. Like, everything was just lame. And it was like, oh well, I guess this is what it is. And then you just had this moment of like pure euphoric excitement. And for a solid, I would say, like, hour and a half, and I was on Twitter at this point, and I had actually a really high follower account. And for like an hour and a half, like, libtard Twitter was genuinely melting down. Like, they legitimately thought the democracy was going to crumble. And you had these people like, I'm preparing to leave the country. I don't have cash on me. What do I do? Like, it was just wild. And then you had those pictures coming out of like all the Capitol Hill staffers and journalists, like, they're hiding inside the building. They have like these giant, these comical like masks or something. Like, the one guy, he looks like a character from 10,000 Leagues Under the Sea or something. It was so bad. And they're just all freaking out. And it was magical. It was so good. It was like just unbelievably fun. And it was this moment of really feeling like, wait, this is how things work. Like, you can just do this. And of course, obviously, that all came for naught later. And it was largely, I think, sort of, you know, people were sort of pushed in that direction by forces that didn't have their best interests in mind.
Yeah, I
But
mean, I think
nonetheless,
the lesson is like, I mean, it's essentially the same lesson of as Charlottesville, right? Like, and because we can look at footage and say, well, this looks like these certain actors are maybe planted or whatnot, and it doesn't maybe look like
right.
this was so organic as you would think.
Well, it's going to be
Although
interesting.
I think January 6th was actually, I do think a lot of it was organic. And I think the thing about it too, that I will say is the lesson I drew from it, is like, these things are possible. You just have to mean it. And you have to have an idea of what you're doing.
Yeah. Like,
because what kind of like, as all the news was trickling out, it's like, yeah, they went to the Capitol and they were like wandering around. Like the dude sticks his feet on Nancy Pelosi's desk, and you got like the grandmother waving
Grant,
American flag,
you're
just sort of
robotic.
like wild or whatever. So, it is possible. Oh, bad. All right, I'll mute
Oh
for
no,
a minute
yeah,
and see if
no,
this
no,
helps.
you're back. You're back.
Okay, but
Yeah,
basically,
yeah.
it's fine to do this. You just have to like know what you're doing, because what wound up happening is like, you did the quote unquote crime and you got no benefit out of it other than trolling your enemies.
Yeah.
Which, for what it's worth, trolling is really fun, but it's not worth being stuck in federal prison indefinitely.
Yeah, I mean, we really own the libs, right? Like,
they did the Joker meme. They literally they caught the car and didn't know what to do with it.
Yeah, but the fact that that's possible is in and of itself something to learn, I think.
Oh yeah, like it does show, like, to do it to anyone that might be listening. This is purely for hypothetical scholarly discussions. It turns out you can get a lot done if you just have people with bodies that are willing to do stuff. The Bundy showed it in this case, in the case of January 6th. It's like, what if we just, I don't know, went in and put our feet on Pelosi's desks? In the case of what could have happened in a greater sense, that's a little more debatable. I mean, they could have like made an actual spectacle out of it that might have invoked a popular uprising, but I think the biggest, like in an ideal scenario, if I was the, what was it, the MAGA Viking or whatever, the dude that
oh yeah, the MAGA shaman.
QAnon shaman, that's what
Yeah,
I
the
was saying.
QAnon shaman.
Like if I were him and I was like leading dudes in that case, you'd basically just want to turn it into a spectacle, because the U.S. government does not literally just operate out of the Capitol with the sacred soil and all that stuff. It's not like that.
Right. It's not like we have to do like the holy goat sacrifices in the Capitol.
Yeah. In the case of this, you'd want to have guys already ready for making an absolute spectacle out of it. Like you'd want multiple backup like stream accounts and things like that, with Twitter accounts to spread it and everything like that. And so you could immediately spread like a live stream of him doing his thing on top of the speaker chair, delivering an absolutely banger of a speech without any interruptions, because YouTube/Twitter/ Facebook, etc., couldn't shut them down quick enough. Plus, backup 4chan accounts, things like that, in order to absolutely spread it like wildfire. That would be the way you would inflict maximum kind of fifth generational warfare to your casualties upon the enemy in this case, if you really wanted to damage regime credibility, because ultimately the U.S. government comes down to like, can you trust them to replace your money when a bank gets robbed? Like I was
it's
reflecting.
basically like, can they do the like evil empire bit, but do it like credibly? Like that's the thing. That's one of the reasons why I think, frankly, it was like a lot of January 6th was authentic. Is like all these pictures that were coming out, right, of like just all the people sitting there on the Capitol steps. And the one where it's like you have the fire and you have the giant American flag, and all the flags, man, that people were running there were awesome. And those images are not images that help your credibility as the federal government at all. And in terms of like a psyop that just like these people did a bad thing to the holy temple of democracy or whatever, you don't need those images. But those images were coming out.
Oh yeah, like it was definitely organic. I do think at the same time, like Ray Epps and whatnot, super sus. And
they were led into a trap basically. But
yeah, I eagerly wait.
Is
Tucker
my
Carlson,
speculation.
Was it Tucker Carlson got like 40,000 hours worth of footage or something like that for January 6th. So I wait for him to kind of give us the parsed version of events. But yeah, let's not kid ourselves. Like people legitimately, it was the first case of the right really doing and flexing what the left does
We
regularly.
literally did something. It was the first time we've literally ever done something. And this was why like Twitter went wild about it too in the days afterwards, is it's like, and man, there were some accounts that were really, really bad that were doing the like, it couldn't have been right wingers that did this because they actually did something. Like, if that's the argument you're making, like, what are you doing, man?
Like it legitimately was a backfire, Mike. My long take on January 6th is it's going to be the thing that everyone's going to point to as the spark that started the smolder. Because it was that kind of like crystallized moment where everyone to the right, from the high to the low and whatnot, like even more than Trump, quite frankly, because Trump himself was, a surrogate for us. Whereas in the case of, J6, it was that moment where everyone kind of realized, oh shoot, they actually are beginning to take us seriously. Previously, we kind of just we didn't exist in a certain respect in the minds of our enemies, and now they're listening because they're reacting to something that's so obviously benign in one sense. I mean, yeah, there was some damaged federal property, but the only people that died was it like a couple of police officers in a helicopter that crashed or something like that, and like
That woman was Ashley Babbitt. She was shot.
And yeah, the only person that was actually like murdered in homicide, or that was died by homicide, was a civilian. Quite frankly, that wasn't even threatening. And it took forever for us to figure out who it was that actually did it. And so it was legitimately this kind of like the regime had to lose their composure in order to in a non-performative way, because like with Trump, that was kind of like, well, it drives clicks and whatnot. In this case, they were like,
there was at least an argument for it, and like the truth of the matter too is like the Biden administration has continued a lot of the policies of Trump, so there was some there, but with this, you just saw like a fundamental like that's just not credible. Like the whole, even the thing that they were doing where it's like, we're going to have the HBO show about January 6th, like the January 6th committee, like they have this vision of it being the new McCarthy hearings or something. It just like wasn't a thing. Like even the liberals that I know, the libtards that I know, it's just like, it's not that they didn't care, because they got some of the propaganda that like, it was an attack on, the democracy or whatever. But it doesn't come off as credible. It doesn't come off that the people really pushing it come off as the unhinged ones. Ironically, not the like insane Q people. The insane Q people come off as the more reasonable party here.
Yeah.
Well, I'm actually going to kind of push back on where we're going with all of this. Very recently, Curtis Yarvin was on a stream with Aaron McIntyre, and he was talking a lot. And I know Curtis Yarvin is cringe now.
Curtis Yarvin is about to hit his stride on some level.
Yeah, I think he is. I think there's kind of a comeback tour in his future.
He's got his upsides and downsides. I've been meaning to listen to that stream. I've been hearing some,
but I think it kind of speaks to this in that we could. So any sort of positive feelings we might have about what happened, on that day, or like what we could say it showed a vulnerability. The right wing did something. Yarvin, I think, is correct in that counter revolutions aren't like revolutions. Revolutions can be gradual. Counter revolutions have to be all at once.
Yeah.
And D-Day isn't won because they sent a fishing boat and they took some pot shots at the Nazis, and then they came by. They had to come all at once, all at one time. And so, like January 6th, whatever you want to say, like it's not, it really isn't adequate, and it is a failure in that, and not just in the failure that it is obviously, or that it was obviously, but it's a failure in that it actually feeds it every kind of coastal lib who had a little bit of fear maybe about the savage Heartlander or Red State American now has had their fears confirmed, even just a little bit, even though it's staged, even though it's, but they're not going to get that because the HBO run,
right, that's lost on them.
Yeah, the HBO produced, January 6th committee isn't for you, it's for them, and it was successful among them, and so it's a success in that the people who needed to see it saw it.
I mean, I don't necessarily disagree. I just don't think I don't think it changes the playing field for the left in the way that it changes it for, I guess you could say, and this is this gets into a whole different can of worms, but I think in terms of something that actually makes the American empire look bad, this is the first thing that I can really point to and say it actually makes the American empire look bad. The truth of the matter is most of the stuff that's come down, unless you want to you can make the argument for Afghanistan.
In memory, the thing that has made the American empire look the worst is the plot of Afghanistan.
I mean, on some level, but the thing about that is you're still leaving this country where we have now dumped, untold amounts of weapons on a country that borders China. So there's still strategic, I understand how that comes across, but the other thing about military defeats in that sense is it winds up looking not as much like a defeat when you're a few years removed from it, if that makes sense.
No, yeah, and that's the optimistic, I think, and I think everybody in America would say it's well, we're out. There wasn't any good way to get out, and you could say that, you could perhaps say that, oh, Joe Biden did his best or whatever, but this is how. But
it also depends on what the goals are. Do we really think that our goal was to make them a liberal democracy? Because obviously, that's an abject failure. But then you're sort of getting into well, are we doing this for the actual stated reasons that are sort of UN platitudes, or are we doing it for cynical reasons? And I think you could make an argument either way, but.
Well, that was the refrain of every kind of general who went in front of Congress during the Afghanistan wars. I don't have a goal. You haven't given me a victory condition. There's no win condition for the United States.
Right. And so that's another element here. And that's where I feel give it 5 or 10 years, Afghanistan will just be one of these things where it's it was really unclear what we were doing. It's kind of a defeat, but we also kind of weren't trying. I guess what I would say is I feel Afghanistan is a lot more explainable than January 6th is. Those images are never going away of what happened on January 6th. They're just there permanently. And that's something that I think undermines the empire's credibility more than the defeat in Afghanistan does.
Well, I guess my take is different in that the images that you or I would kind of take glee in seeing, because I like that somebody took a dump in Nancy Pelosi's closet, on the Capitol. That's funny. I laugh.
I like the fact that that a certain short man was seen running from AOC's office with her shoes.
Yeah, I think I don't know. I'm kind of confused, but it's kind of crazy to see Baked Alaska sitting in a representative seat. All these things are funny.
Prank calling from their phone.
These are all funny things, and they are funny. They're legitimately funny. But the same glee that you take in, the same victory, is also funneled in an opposite direction on the opposite side.
Oh yeah,
it does cause fear. AOC's, who wasn't even in the building at the time, her outrage is the outrage of every, Wynant in I don't know what's any affluent suburb anywhere, you know.
I guess it's
Sure, like Brooklyn or whatever.
I guess it's also to be slightly empathetic to them. It is the case where we do live in a society where women are so detached from reality. A significant fraction of them think that like things like strength differences either don't exist and or are just caused by socialization. And that when women are like actually confronted with their boyfriend who technically weighs the same amount as they do, or like roughly close, and they decide to actually wrestle, and the boyfriend just like completely pounds her because it's like, well, differences in strength, muscle density and whatnot. Um, I feel like there was a legitimate fear that pierced their lizard brain when they realized, like, oh shoot, uh, the people are actually angry, and so now we have to leave and wear these really ridiculous, gas mask bag head things. And so I guess you could say it makes sense why they might have reacted so much, because they've never really had a gut check, quite frankly, for what. When's the last time the U.S. Congress actually got threatened? And mind you, threatened in a legitimate way that is adjusted for the composition. Because previously, like, what was it, like Puerto
Like the
Rican terrorists?
50s.
Yeah, like the
Yeah.
50s, but they were like, younger dudes and almost all dudes. So it's like,
Well, I
oh,
mean, the much swept under the rug um, Summer of Floyd protests in front of the White House were very close
they
to
were
the White
close,
House.
but they didn't penetrate, is what I'm saying. Like, they didn't actually go into the Capitol. There was like Puerto
Yeah, and I
Rican
kind of
terrorists.
like I don't know how much you really say like the whole summer of hate thing. Like if you're a congressional representative, are you really threatened by that? I mean, I don't know. I mean, either of you can correct me if you feel strongly about it, but it's one of these things that's kind of like,
No,
well,
my example doesn't count in reality because those protesters were protesting Donald Trump, who is, of course, an enemy and deserves any sort of bad thing that comes his way in these people's minds.
right.
And so it doesn't count in their point of view.
Right, it doesn't
Like
come across
if
like an
you're
angry
objectively
mob.
like angry mob attacking federal building, that 2020 protest in front of the White House should have been like front page news for weeks.
Yeah, it part of it is just narrative construction, but also I think that there is a genuine difference in the qualitative material of who makes up Congress. Like, what was it, like Puerto Rican separatist terrorists like occupied the Capitol during like the 60s or something like that.
I don't
But
know that they occupied it, but there were like bombs that they tried to bomb it and they tried to
yeah,
shoot some people.
they tried to attack it and whatnot. It wasn't just merely burning stuff on the outside. It was actually like a direct material attack on the Capitol. Um, and in that case, you're dealing with like a lot of World War II vets, quite frankly. And so it's like,
I
know,
guess your other analog here is the baseball shooting, but obviously that's only Republicans and they weren't in the Capitol at the time.
yeah, I mean, yeah, they're in that case, yeah, the baseball shooting isn't quite analogous because it's controlled opposition and whatnot. Um,
Yeah.
I mean, I also, speaking of the Gabby Giffords shooting, is also kind of in their minds, but I'm not quite sure if that shooter was ideological.
Yeah, I thought that was like a crime that just happened.
Yeah, I can't
but
remember.
I
really
don't
can't
remember either.
I will quickly look that up, but
Yeah,
it
he might have
it,
just been nuts. But
it might have also just been a very single issue guy, if I recall correctly. Like, if I recall correctly, it was some sort of NRA nut or something like that. Let's see, Gabby Giffords.
Man,
Yeah.
that is bad if that's an NRA nut. I didn't think it'd be that bad.
But even then, like, gun control. I mean, it mentions that she's a gun control advocate. An assassination attempt. Huh. See, kill. Apparently, other people were killed. but she was the target. Weapon perpetrator Jared Lee Lofner. I guess that's how you pronounce it. He does have cursed physiognomy. Let's see. Background, expressed views. Registered independent. Okay. Yeah, it looks like he apparently had conspiracy theories. Part of a message board.
Well, as fascinating as this discussion is, I think for the sake of Mr. David Wayne's YouTube channel health, we should steer away from
Yeah.
political
Yeah.
acts of terrorism done in the last however many decades.
Yeah, that is fair, especially because I do have people that put me on a higher radar, or a higher level of radar sensitivity. But TLDR, he would technically be classed as right wing, but he wasn't like an easy to slot in rock rib Republican who went crazy type of a deal. Anyway, just to close that
I mean,
discussion
I feel like the Gabby Gifford shooting is far enough removed that we could talk about it. But yes,
but it's
Right.
fair.
Well, I'm just going abundance of caution here, not to go all longhouse on you gentlemen, but you know,
the longhouse meme.
the Longhouse meme.
I
I
don't
love
get.
it.
It's a good meme. I'm genuinely kind of like baffled that people are confused by it because it's a relatively simple meme.
confused is not like I don't believe Sohrab Omari is confused by it. He's just using that as a rhetorical flourish.
Yeah. Well,
I mean,
what was it that who I forget who said it on Twitter that Sohrab Omari now that he converted religions and unsuccessfully unsuccessfully tried to become white, so now he's trying to convert to being a leftist.
I think that was ZHP, but I'm not quite sure. But yeah,
Maybe that was a good post.
Oh man.
Yeah, Amari, his kind of track has gone, really
He's
kind of
bizarre.
because the compact one I really don't like that he's still on with the American Conservative.
Yeah, but that's like Dreer's publication, so I don't really
Not anymore. Not anymore. Dreyer's gone off.
Did they kick
Yeah, I
Dreyer?
know Dreer.
Dreyer
No.
stepped down.
Dreyer stepped
He
down.
didn't get kicked off, but he's joining the Substack race so that he can charge people for his columns instead of putting them out for free.
He's now part of the cursed Substack race because he is putting all his shit behind a paywall.
Ooh, boo.
Yeah, if you're on Substack and everything's behind a paywall, it's kind of like, yeah, all right, sorry, I'm not subbing to your OnlyFans, but Theory Cell.
No, that's
Yes, I have to pay $10 a month to see if Rod Dreher got a
it's
a
called
new wife.
it's called OnlyMans if it's just for Theory Cell.
Yeah.
But yeah,
I will say it is a proud day for the American Conservative that Rod Dreher no longer writes for them frequently.
I'm just playing like Hava Nagila right now because I'm like celebrating.
Yeah.
Because I'm celebrating that we managed to bully Dreher off of there. Oh.
Man, that was another thing that was really funny, actually. Speaking of the whole Minesweeper saga, is I encountered Minesweeper because he called Dreer, I forget what it was. I have it screenshotted somewhere, but something like a Pazuki gorging. It was like some very elaborate insult. And then he got all of his followers, because Dreer blocked him. He got all of his followers to spam Dreer's mentions saying like, I'm sorry, I didn't mean it. Will you please unblock Minesweeper? And so Dreer unblocked him. And of course he did the exact same thing to him again. Oh,
Dreher,
man.
if anyone deserves that type of treatment, it's Dreher. Absolutely.
It was so
scum
funny.
of the earth.
The Dreher grift is egregious, but I think it's actually less harmful than the Amari grift.
Yeah.
I don't know. Like Dreer is basically the most well-known Christian writer on the right, and I don't say that in a complimentary sense.
I mean, like, quite frankly, based on just pure behavior, I'd consider Amari more white than Dreyer.
Yeah. I don't know that I could go that far.
I mean, who's written about African American primitive root wieners?
Oh my goodness.
I guess for me, the
He
final
is from
straw with
Louisiana,
Amari-
though.
Yeah, the final straw with Amari was he wrote this article for his new thing, Compact, and it was like him going to like this union convention, and it's like, oh, if we want to have our multicultural, working class, conservative Republican Party, you're going to have to learn how to play ball with these blue-haired union representatives. And it's like, well, hold on a second, like. It's like, and he's like, so yes, I did put on the
Yeah.
name badge with pronouns, and it's like,
What?
yeah,
Okay, yeah. I walk back
Yeah.
my previous statement. He is no longer in the circle.
yeah. I mean, Amari's just straight up leftism. Like that's what he's going to be saying.
I knew he was already kind of scum. He was really scum because he retweeted. What was it Tinksorg's take on, like, oh, well,
On the Haitian Revolution. It was
Yes.
so bad, so bad.
I kind of left this like, you still have, because it's a retweet. It wasn't like a quote tweet or something like that. It wasn't a like. So I was like, okay, it's a retweet. It's still scummy because it's a scummy take. I don't really see why you would retweet it, but whatever. You have some men who live in their minds a lot are very weird, and so you'll end up seeing weird stuff that's kind of hard to explain in the moment. What happened in the moment when you decide to do it. But yeah, no, if you he wore the pronoun badge, yeah, no. At least Dreyer wrote a book called "Live Not by Lies."
Yeah, if only he took his own advice on that one, but that's another story.
Yeah.
I don't know, man. Like, Amari is part of this crew that is like the definition of Judeo-Papist. And there are a few other of those guys, but they're just like, I've always just
crazy to think-
instinctively distrusted them.
Like I had classes with Dr. Pecknold. Like it's kind
Man,
of
that
crazy.
is kind of crazy.
Wait,
Like
who's Doc-
he was
who's
such a
Dr.
normal
Pecknold?
guy, and like Family Guy. You know, I was at Catholic University, and you know, studying for a diocese, and he was just like, okay, this is Augustine, and it's like, oh, this is all fairly run of the mill. Yes. But you know, on Twitter, it's like, well, we have to like, destroy capitalism because that's, it's like, what are we talking about here? I'm pretty sure none of this is copacetic.
Well, and it's
with,
it's not believable either. Like, the thing about, I would say, sort of religion in the public square is at this point, like, you're either functionally kind of like an atheist materialist or spiritual but not religious, or you're just like sort of a genuine cultist. And I don't say this even like insultingly exactly, but it's just like the people who are religious, you can kind of tell like it's very, very deep in their character because nothing other than that really survives. And like when I see people like Amari or Vermeule is the other one who's just terrible. It's like, first of all, I have a hard time believing that you even care about, like, do I genuinely believe that these guys are deeply concerned with Jesus Christ or the Christian faith? Not particularly. It's just sort of like I'll wear whatever hat I have to. And that sort of thing is really, really like, I don't know, gets under my skin.
Yeah.
I regard Vermeule's conversion in the same light as, your anime lolly profile, Twitter users' conversion to Catholicism. It's like, okay,
right, exactly.
It's like,
shots fired.
Yeah, I mean, like, it's like, okay, yes, we'll see.
I mean, in fairness, that's basically what I consider a very large number of online Catholics that aren't of the particularly like lolly anime stripe variety, but like was it shoot, do those for holes. Just do it, guy. Who's the actor I'm thinking of, guys? The guy that what's his name? Shia LaBeouf.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, it's like where I'm like, okay, I'm glad that you've decided to not be a degenerate. On the
Yeah.
other hand, I'm gonna wait. I want to see what you do. I want to look good.
Yeah, and
Maybe
Shia
5 years.
LaBeouf is at a big disadvantage because he was, a child star in a Disney Channel TV show. So just effed at the beginning of his life.
Oh yeah, like I have I have a very large degree of sympathy because I know I've known people that had to deal with those very kind of like high flying, tenuous situations, especially if they've been born into it, and then they're having to make that radical break. It's like it's not a simple thing, but I give kind of like the 5 year grace period, roughly speaking, where it's like I have, depending on what the exact circumstance it is. Like with Milo, for example, he claims he is converted back to Catholicism in a serious manner and all that stuff. I'm like, okay, come back to me when you have 3 children. Then I will believe that you have actually like a lifetime long of faithfulness. That also is an option, but
I don't
otherwise,
know, man. Milo's in that category of people I don't think I can ever trust. Like I don't want to be too harsh on the guy, but I just like on a baseline level, I don't think I can ever trust him, regardless of what he does.
that's fair. I mean, I wouldn't trust him to handle anything involving money. But if we're talking just like, okay, can I trust him to like show up and not like bring a train wreck with him? If he shows a pattern and whatnot, I probably could trust him. But for now, still things look kind of shady. It would help if he married and had children. But that does not appear to be in the cards right now for him.
Yeah, and Milo is like hanging out with Mr. Fuentes is like, okay, now these are 2 people who have pretty strong allegations of being FBI informants.
Hmm?
Like,
slash also homosexuals as well.
yeah, also, which is actually goes pretty hand in hand historically. That's why that's why the Sopranos, they have to kill that guy for being a homo, because like that's leverage. That's what the FBI is going to use on you. Like,
was it a J. Edgar Hoover? It all
Yeah.
started from the beginning.
yeah, so it's all, you can't you can't maybe
You just
Milo's
can't
faith
trust
is,
him.
maybe Milo's
Sorry.
faith is genuine, but he's not a great actor on the grounds of like, okay, so the last big stunt you pulled was walking around with Kanye West right before he goes on InfoWars and talks about a certain Austrian painter.
You see, that was an interesting thing that was brought up in the latest or in the second to latest Joe Rogan episode with Eric Weinstein, because like most of it is basically him talking and bullshitting with Joe Rogan about like just generic stuff, like talking about how Teslas don't connect you to the road in the same way that like manual cars do and whatnot, or talking about genuinely the interesting state of physics and whatnot and his particular bugaboo theories and such. For the last like 30-45 minutes, he goes in and starts talking about politics and whatnot, talking about in a very human way, talking about how check that. Oh, okay. It's very, talking in a very human way about the problem of like what Kanye West provided in terms of like just dealing with trying to understand his own human motivations and whatnot. Because in the case of Kanye West, he's very smart, but he also has severe mental illness, and so trying to understand exactly what he's doing in a actually sympathetic manner is really kind of a mind screw.
Yeah,
And,
Yeah, you got a lot of genuine, like, literally, what did he mean by this moments.
yeah, because as far as like Eric's take was as a very kind of aggressively Jewish man, uh, with Kanye is like he understands. He thinks that Kanye is genuinely a humanist. At the same time, he's like, yeah, but dang man, you just went off the reservation there. You just went off the rails. And is there anything in particular, Grant, you would like to touch upon and expand upon because you're about to have to bounce off?
Nothing particularly, other than Twitter is fun. If Twitter is a hell site for you, you're using it wrong. Okay, Twitter is heaven site. It's awesome.
Yeah, Twitter is a. I understand why people think of it as a hell site because for people that are enslaved to the dopamine cycle, totally understand that. You know, I've been recently having to deal with, just generally speaking, reflecting on the nature of like dopamine drip and whatnot because you have to maintain.
Yeah, that's definitely negative.
At the same time, it's like, as I mentioned in other streams, Twitter in a weird sense has been the most healthy of social media sites because it's literally evolved into a dating service.
Well, that wasn't what I was going to go off of, but yes, that's true as well.
Like very seriously, because there's no you do have some hierarchalizing things like Twitter circles and whatnot that's have developed, but other than that, it's just anarchy, and if you have the will, you can curate your own experience. At the same time, some tweet you do can get to an entirely different organic sphere of influence and just blow up.
Yeah, I guess
that's always like a blast. Go ahead.
I have a more value neutral take on Twitter. I guess Twitter is trench warfare, and you're and your experience is either All Quiet on the Western Front or it's Storm of Steel, and you get to choose.
Yeah, that's fair.
Mm-hmm.
But I'm all Storm of Steel on that. The Giga Chad dialogue literally is one of these, like, it's like a new language. It's just amazing. Hail John Winthrop.
or apocryphal quotes of you impersonating a certain U.S. president.
Oh my gosh.
Speaking of impersonating U.S. presidents and the original topic of this stream, the TikTok AI stuff, I guess what has also been promulgating recently are these AI voice impressions of
Oh yeah,
specifically Donald Trump and Joe Biden, like playing.
Oh, those are so funny.
They're some of them are extremely funny.
Get on my level, whore.
Yeah,
that was so good.
Oh, those are so entertaining. It's not even funny. It's probably the best like clips of just pure like wholesome isn't the right word.
I mean, it is wholesome in that it's like imagine these two people.
It's just funny.
Yeah, it's like neutral.
Everybody has been so emotionally and charged. It's like the conflict between these two people was like going to decide the future of the country, and now we can just imagine them flaming each other on Minecraft servers.
I don't
just...
know if you saw that one, the one where it was like the last four presidents. So it was Trump, Biden, Obama, and Bush. They were like building something, and of course they were all going off on each other. It was just unbelievably funny. Just the image of it.
Yeah, I guess you could say just uncharged funny, because there's no attempt to like there's no factional dunk or anything like that with these clips. It's the closest analog I would say. It's like watching the Three Stooges. Like every guy goes through the phase where they just binge like Three Stooges clips and whatnot. It's like that. There's no political factionalism about it. There's no tinging to it, even though they're political figures. It's just hearing old men just dunk on each other like they're teenagers, and it's so alien to us that it has a novelty unto itself that that's so refreshing, and that's why I like the clip so much. Quite frankly, it's like I just love hearing the idea of like the snarky Obama and the hyper aggro Trump and the Biden who is just like the stoner bro among the group. It's, yeah, what regardless of what particular video game they're all hypothetically playing.
All right, gentlemen, I gotta bounce, but good hanging with you guys.
Yeah, I think that's as Oros has graciously delayed his stream by 2 hours, so in respect to him, I shall likewise end this stream a bit early, or well, a bit abruptly, for his benefit as well as just generally speaking.
Yeah, 2 hour mark's a good place to stop.
But thank you, gentlemen, for being guests on my stream and helping me generate good content, because I'm not skilled to do monologues just for hours and whatnot. If you have anything to plug, please plug it.
I guess not right now. My Twitter is in a weird spot because I'm like changing handles and stuff and like trying to start this blog. But so right now, nothing.
Follow my Twitter. My @ is John Winthrop, JAWN Winthrop, one word.
Alrighty then. Well, to our audience, present and future, good evening, good morning, and good night.